Listen to the audiobook, Wuthering Heights, by Emily Brontë. Level B1, Oxford Reading University.
Part 1.
Mr. Lockwood's Diary, 1801. 1. I moved to Thrushcross Grange for some peace and quiet. This is certainly a beautiful place, so completely remote from society. Here, the land is open and empty. The moors look like a grey sea. Most of the time, the hills and the moors are covered in mist. I feel like I might easily see a ghost here. After unpacking, I walked to meet my landlord, Mr. Heathcliff. His farmhouse was 4 miles away from Thrushcross Grange. The place was called Wuthering Heights. As I found out later, people here say "wuthering" about the wind when it is strong and angry. The house stood alone against the sky. The wind shook the gate and bent the trees low to the ground. I knocked. A dark-haired, middle-aged man opened the door. He looked at me carefully, as if I might cause trouble. "Mr. Heathcliff, we are neighbours, sir," I began. "My name is Lockwood. I recently arrived at Thrushcross Grange." He gave a short nod and said, "Walk in." The hall was narrow and cold. In the big room ahead, the fire burned low. I tried to smile. "We will be neighbours," I said. "I hope we could be good friends too." "Perhaps," he answered in a cold voice. I sat on a chair near the fire. Several dogs watched me. Their eyes were yellow in the firelight. I reached out a hand in an attempt to pet one of them. "Leave the dog alone," said Heathcliff angrily. "She is not used to being treated like a pet." At that moment all the dogs rose, growling. Then suddenly they jumped at me, their teeth and hot breath at my boots and coat. 2 angry animals bit my trousers, and another one tried to tear my hat. I shouted, "Help, Mr. Heathcliff!" Heathcliff finally spoke calmly. "Quiet." The dogs fell back. I was shaken and, I must admit, quite angry. "Is this how you welcome a guest?" I asked. "Forgive me, Mr. Lockwood," he replied. "Guests are very rare in this house. My dogs and I hardly know how to receive them." For a while we sat in uncomfortable silence. I watched Mr. Heathcliff trying to understand what kind of person he was. His hair was black as coal, and his eyes seemed to hide something. There was a strange sadness about him. I began to warm up and calmed down a little. We got into conversation, and it was quite interesting. I found Heathcliff very intelligent and well-educated. I wished to set up friendly relations with him. "May I come again tomorrow?" I asked, rising. "We can speak more then." He hesitated a little, but finally said, "Come when you please." He clearly did not want me to visit again, but I will go anyway. It is surprising how friendly I feel compared to him. 2. Yesterday afternoon was misty and cold. I decided to visit Wuthering Heights again. I wanted to show Mr. Heathcliff that I was not afraid of the cold or the long walk. The wind was sharp, and snow began to fall as I reached the gate. I knocked once, then twice. No one came. At last, an old servant, Joseph, shouted from the barn, "Master is not in." His voice sounded rough. I stood waiting until a young man appeared. He was strong and looked a little wild, with worn clothes and a hard look in his eyes. Without a word, he opened the door and led me inside. There, a pale young woman sat near the fire. I was amazed by her beauty. "Rough weather," I said. "I am afraid, Mrs. Heathcliff, that your servants were very slow to open the door. It was quite hard to make them hear me." She looked at me coldly and remained still and silent. I looked around the room. Near the fire I saw several dogs lying on the floor, large animals with attentive eyes. One of them raised its head and watched me closely. Trying to be friendly, I reached out my hand towards the dog and said cheerfully, "What a beautiful animal! Are these your dogs, madam?" "They are not mine," she answered, even less friendly than Heathcliff himself ever could. Before I could ask more questions, Heathcliff entered. "What brings you here in this weather?" he asked, shaking the snow off his clothes. "I wanted to return your welcome," I said, "but I am afraid I came at a bad time." Heathcliff's face did not change. "Let me introduce you to my daughter-in-law," he said, pointing at the woman. As he spoke, I saw a hateful look in his eyes. "And this is Hareton Earnshaw?" I looked at the young man in surprise. "Ah, then, your son?" "Not my son, for sure," Heathcliff replied sharply. "Her husband is dead." The room filled with uncomfortable silence. The only sound was the wind pushing against the windows. I did not feel welcome at all. Soon I stood to leave. The snow outside was thick, and it was dark already. "Could someone guide me back to Thrushcross Grange?" I asked. No one answered. Heathcliff was watching the fire. The young woman turned her face away. "I see," I said stiffly. "Then I will find my own way." I took a lantern and went outside. The snow was already deep, reaching my knees. Suddenly, behind me, the old servant shouted, "Thief! He is stealing the lantern!" and let the dogs out. I fell to the ground as they ran to me, barking. When they finally pulled the dogs away, I was so angry that my nose began to bleed. My hands were shaking. The housekeeper, Zillah, helped me to my feet. "You will stay here tonight," she said, guiding me toward a small room. "The storm won't stop any time soon." 3. Zillah led me up a narrow staircase to a room at the far end of the house. "No one sleeps here usually," she said quietly. "Master does not let anybody in, but I don't really know the reason." Then she left. I sat on the bed. The air was cold and smelled of dust. The walls were covered with old books, and the window shook in the strong wind. Suddenly I noticed something. On the wooden ledge near the bed, some names were written: Catherine Earnshaw, Catherine Heathcliff, Catherine Linton. Interested, I opened one of the small notebooks that lay on the nightstand. It was a diary, written many years ago. The handwriting was childish. A girl named Catherine Earnshaw wrote about her brother named Hindley and her friend named Heathcliff. "My brother hates Heathcliff and is often cruel to him. He beats him and calls him names. But to me, Heathcliff is a dear friend. We share every thought and every secret." After a while, my eyes grew heavy, and I fell asleep over the diary. Then suddenly I heard a soft knock on the window. I thought a branch was hitting the glass, so I reached out to break it. But instead of a branch, a cold hand caught mine. "Let me in," cried a voice from the outside. "I am Catherine Linton. I have come home. I lost my way in the moors." Horrified, I tried to pull back, but her fingers held tightly. They were icy and thin as bone. "Go away!" I shouted. "Let me go!" She asked to let her in again, crying. I was so terrified that I pushed her wrist against the broken glass. The glass cut the arm, and there was blood everywhere. But finally the hand let go. I put some books against the window to keep it closed, but they moved as something pushed them from the outside. And so I cried for help. The door opened. Heathcliff stood there. His face was pale, a candle in his hand. "What are you doing? What is going on?" "There is a ghost in this room," I said in a shaking voice. "The house is haunted." Heathcliff's face changed. For a moment I saw pain in his eyes. "Did it say anything?" he asked quietly. "It was a woman. She said her name was Catherine Linton," I replied. Immediately he ran to the window and fell to his knees. "Catherine, come in! Come in!" he cried. I was extremely confused. I felt that I couldn't stay there any longer. I ran past Heathcliff and out into the dark hall. However, I didn't know what to do, so I decided to go down to the kitchen. There, I lay down on a bench and fell asleep. By morning, the house was silent. Heathcliff came down. His face was grey, and his eyes were empty. He barely said a few words as he took me back to Thrushcross Grange. When I reached home, my servants cried happy tears. They were sure I had died in the storm. But I couldn't speak of what I had seen. I went to my room and stayed there all day, tired and cold. In the evening, my housekeeper, Nellie Dean, brought me dinner. "You look pale, sir," she said in a kind voice. "You shouldn't go to that house again." "I cannot rest until I understand them," I answered. "Tell me, Nellie, who are those people?" She looked away. "It is a sad story, Mr. Lockwood. I have known them all since they were children. I grew up in Wuthering Heights myself." And then she began.
Part 2. Told by Nellie Dean. 4. Many years ago, the master of Wuthering Heights was a gentleman named Mr. Earnshaw. He had 2 children, a son, Hindley, and a daughter, Catherine. One day he went to Liverpool and came back with a skinny, dirty child with dark hair. He was only about 7 years old. "I found him hungry and homeless in the streets of Liverpool," Mr. Earnshaw explained. "He will live here with us. I have named him Heathcliff." At first, we were all very surprised. I was scared. Mrs. Earnshaw was angry and wanted to kick the boy out at once. Hindley, who was about 14 years old, hated the boy and called him bad names. Catherine was just 6 at the time. At first, she didn't like the poor boy either, but after a week, I noticed that she started playing with him. Soon, she and Heathcliff became close friends. You couldn't separate them. Over time, Mr. Earnshaw came to love Heathcliff more than his own son. The reason was simple. Mr. Earnshaw preferred quiet and patient children, and Heathcliff was just like that. When the boy was punished, he never complained or cried. He accepted everything in silence. Hindley was very different. He was a noisy, impatient child and argued with his father a lot. Mr. Earnshaw didn't like this attitude at all. He often said that Hindley should follow Heathcliff's example. This made Hindley jealous and angry. His father preferred a dirty street boy over him. Mr. Earnshaw gave Heathcliff better treatment and defended him when Hindley tried to hurt him. This made Hindley hate Heathcliff even more. However, Heathcliff rarely complained about things like this. I thought that he was a very kind boy who knew how to forgive his enemies. But I was completely wrong, as you will soon find out. One evening, Mr. Earnshaw said to Hindley, "You must go to college away from home. Perhaps you will finally learn some manners." And so, Hindley left the house for several years. Catherine and Heathcliff immediately became inseparable. They spent every moment together. They ran over the moors from morning until night, completely free. Mr. Earnshaw was too old and weak to control them properly, and he loved them too much to punish them seriously. The children took advantage of his kindness and did whatever they wanted. About 3 years later, Mr. Earnshaw grew seriously ill. By that time, Catherine was nearly 12 years old, and Heathcliff was about 13. The old master became very weak. He could no longer walk far and spent most of his days sitting in his chair by the fire. One evening, he quietly passed away. Hindley returned for the funeral with his wife, Frances. He still hated Heathcliff as much as before. Now that he was the master, Hindley made him a servant. Moreover, Hindley didn't allow Catherine to spend time with Heathcliff. However, the children continued to meet in secret. I tried to look after Catherine, but I had many other chores too, so it wasn't always possible. One night, Catherine and Heathcliff went out to the moors. They walked far and reached Thrushcross Grange. "Let's see what's going on in the house," Heathcliff suggested. They came close to the house and looked through a large window. There they saw 2 children playing in a beautiful, cosy room. They were Edgar and Isabella Linton, the son and daughter of Mr. Linton, the master of the house. Edgar and Isabella were about the same age as Catherine and Heathcliff, but they looked very different. The Linton children were very neat and well-dressed. Meanwhile, Catherine and Heathcliff were dressed in simple clothes. Their shoes were dirty, and their hair needed brushing. "God, they are so clean and well-behaved," Heathcliff said, and they both laughed. And then, the Lintons' bulldog heard the noise. The dog ran out of the house, barking. Catherine and Heathcliff tried to run away, but the dog caught Catherine by the leg with its strong teeth. She fell, screaming. Heathcliff called for help. The Lintons' servants came running out. They finally freed Catherine and carried her inside the house. Heathcliff tried to follow them, but the servants didn't let him enter. To them, he looked too rough and wild, so he was sent home, while Catherine stayed at the Grange to recover. The next day, Mr. Linton went to Wuthering Heights to explain the situation. Hindley was furious and ashamed of how carelessly he had treated his sister. He turned his anger on Heathcliff, although it wasn't the boy's fault. 5. Catherine spent 5 long weeks at Thrushcross Grange. Mrs. Linton was kind to her, but she was a little bit shocked by how wild and ill-educated the girl was. She decided to turn Catherine into a proper young lady, so Mrs. Linton taught Catherine how to sit, speak, and walk with elegance. During her recovery, Catherine also became good friends with Edgar and Isabella. They read books together, played with Isabella's little dog, and practiced music on the piano. Edgar showed Catherine his collection of books, and Isabella taught her how to sew and draw. Catherine came home by Christmas. When I saw her, I couldn't believe my eyes. She looked very different. Her hair was smooth, her dress was soft and shining, and she had very good manners. Hindley looked at her attentively. "Well, well, well," he said. "My sister has become a fine lady. Heathcliff, you may come forward and wish Miss Catherine welcome, like the other servants."
Stay with us for part 2.
If you enjoyed this video, please leave a comment to support our channel. And now, listen to another great story.